you. Good morning, everyone. Please silence your electronic devices for the duration of the meeting. Welcome to the June 17, 2024 Finance and Audit Committee meeting. I am Councilmember Gil Schussler, and I'm the Finance and Audit Committee Chair. The meeting format is hybrid. A quorum is physically present at the HART Administrative Offices, 1201 East 7th Avenue, Florida Conference Room, and the rest of the board members and participants are participating via communication media technology. Please look at your screens and your devices. An image of the flag is displayed. Please join me, if you can, for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. As I said, we have a quorum is present. Public comment. We will now accept public comment. Is there anyone scheduled to speak or anybody in the audience or electronically? Thank you. Appearing to be none, this concludes the public input section of the meeting. There was no quorum present in the May committee meetings, and the meeting approval was postponed until this meeting. In the packet, you will find the minutes for the April 15, 2024, and the May 20th, 2024 Finance and Audit Committee. If everybody's had a chance to review, is there a motion to approve both sets of minutes? And we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, like sign? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Next, we'll move on to our presentations. Ms. Amanda Vandergrift with InfoStrategies, you are recognized to present the fiscal model update. Good morning, Amanda. How are you?
Good. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Thank you so much. All right. So it's been a little while since I've come to present to this committee, and I'm actually excited because we have some relatively good news with many caveats to share with you today based on the most recent numbers that we've received in the financial model. Last time I was here with you, I talked about a fiscal cliff, and I have been talking about a fiscal cliff with you guys over the past few years as we've looked at your financial model, 30-year projections, as you've navigated the pandemic, and the COVID relief funds have been fully expended as of this year, and we're now entering what I call the new normal, HART's new normal, without the COVID relief funds, holding you up. And I have some good news is that, with the recent changes in the recent numbers, that with our baseline, everything we're doing today, we don't have a fiscal cliff anymore, but there are some caveats behind that's just continuing what you're doing today, not doing anything that Justin mentioned in the previous committee, all of those improvements that you want to do in the TDP, none of that is funded, but at least we can say now that there is not a pending fiscal cliff in the near future, which is really something to celebrate because HART really has been on that fiscal cliff for several years. And this is the first time I've been able to say that to this committee and to the board in several years. So we'll show you what the baseline financial model looks like today, some key findings, and then I know that we've been talking about this financial model training for a while. We actually are going to be holding a financial model training today and tomorrow. So the time has come for the financial model handoff to the folks at your staff level, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. So recent changes since we last talked to you in October, you have your most recent draft operating and capital budgets that were presented to the board. They have future year projections included in that as well. We have a new cost estimate for the heavy maintenance facility in the financial model. One thing about the budgets that we saw in the most recent actuals for this year and then also into the budget projections was we saw much higher ad valorem, fare box revenue, and operating funds than we were projecting in the prior financial model. And that's great news. We're also seeing at the same time, a slowing in your operating cost growth compared to what we were projecting. So we were purposely projecting things to be very conservatively growing, higher than what you had historically. And luckily, as we're seeing around the country, costs are cooling, and you're seeing that now in your actuals. So all very good news for us to be able to kind of say more comfortably where we are today. We're not on the fiscal cliff in the baseline. The FDOT study findings were also released since I last talked to you, which verified exactly what I've been telling you guys and what you've heard many times and you've been saying to yourself. You have been doing a lot with a very limited amount of funding compared to your peers. You have a major need to invest in a state of good repair, including the heavy maintenance facility, which I think you saw this past week, is in dire need of enhancement and improvement. So the good news, farebox revenue is higher. So you can see at the top with the green bars, we had a dip during the pandemic. It's come up, and in 2025, it's higher than 24. That's helping us. Ad valorem revenue has continued to trend upwards, higher than your projections. And federal operating funds, you can see in 22 and 23, we had lower federal operating funds. You use some of that for capital. You typically use it all for operations. We've decided to put it back on the operating side. You had a fiscal cliff, so it makes sense to use that for operations. So that's much higher than we had previously shown in previous years and in projections moving forward. So that has really helped us on the revenue side. On the cost side, you can see the bottom right graph here that costs are starting to cool a bit. So what I saw was that you guys have been very, very strategic about your costs, your operating costs, your budgets, and making sure that you're doing the most with what you have. And you can see that here with a cooling of operating costs, which helps us right the ship and not see a major difference between revenues and costs. So with all of that included, we have, we're not showing a fiscal cliff. So previously when I showed you a scenario like this, you'd see the gray area behind the graphic on the screen would dip negative. So it would go below zero as early as next year. That's where HART was. You were on the fiscal cliff virtually every year. You'd present a budget that was balanced, and then you'd push it back 1 year. In this scenario, we're looking at actually your reserves continuing into the future, and you're not hitting a cliff in the near future because we have higher operating revenue and we have a more steady operating cost growth. That's great news. And I want to say that one more time before I then caveat it and tell you that that includes no other improvements beyond what's in your capital plan that was presented to you, to the full board. It doesn't include any of the service improvements that Justin just talked about that, are really important service improvements that are needed. It doesn't include the bus shelter expansion programs, any other state of good repair needs, the TICO streetcar extension. None of that is included in this. So yes, we're not on a fiscal cliff, but HART absolutely needs more money to do anything that you want to do in the future. One of the big caveats I also want to mention is you see the red bars. Those are all discretionary grant funds that you're assuming in your capital plan. Discretionary grant funds are discretionary. They are competitive. You're not, guaranteed to receive those. So if you did not receive every single one of them, you'd be on a fiscal cliff. You wouldn't be able to deliver your maintenance facility, which is that big spike. You would not be able to present a balanced capital budget moving forward. Hopefully you will be successful in receiving some of those grants, but you will need to size your budget accordingly to what you receive in federal grants. And if you don't receive them, you'd have to push those projects back, delay capital needs, which has a compounding effect on the health of the agency. So just to mention again, this is your baseline. If you don't receive all of these federal funds, we're not including any of the other things you want to do. You could be on the cliff if you don't receive the federal grants that we're assuming you're going to receive. So generally good news, many caveats behind it. And there's just a dire need, as there always has been, and at least since I've been presenting to this committee and this board, for state of good repair and state of good repair funding. And a trade-off between funding your operating budget, which is really critical, and using some of those funds to also fund state of good repair so we can continue to have a healthy system. So key findings over the past fiscal year, we're seeing some good news on the revenue side. We're seeing lower operating cost growth. We do not see in the baseline, meaning existing service continuing into the future, we do not see that urgent fiscal cliff that you've been seeing over the past few years, which is good news. And this will likely allow HART to continue funding existing service and also to fund many of the capital needs that you have in your capital plan, assuming you receive the federal grants that you're saying we're going to receive in that capital plan. But the big point that I continue to say to this committee and to this board is you need more funding. Without funding, you are not in a financial position to do any more than you do today or undertake any other capital projects beyond what you have in your capital plan. And that includes a lot of the items that you were just talking about in the prior committee with Justin, the COVID-19 service levels, wanting to increase service, expand the bus shelter program, fund expansion projects like the Tico streetcar extension. All of that would not be included without additional funding. So in the near term, we'd be looking to continue to align our costs with available revenue. I think HART has really done a great job in the past year doing that. So continuing to do that into the future with your budgets. While you also want to be very proactive and look at ways for those priority projects to bring in more federal money, to partner with the locals, with the regional partners, with the state partners, to advance the projects that you can advance. But the reality is, without an additional long-term revenue stream, you're really continuing your status quo. You need more money to do anything more than that. So the exciting news is the financial model training. So as part of our work, we developed a 30-year financial model, very detailed cash flow with projections on capital and operating. And we'll be working with Justin, Melanie, and Nicholas over the next 2 days to teach them about the model, how to financial model with the FAST standard, get them set up with everything they need on their computers. And knowing that you're not going to learn everything in 2 days, we will be available to answer questions, provide any more detailed modeling edits, but to help keep everything on track. And I'm happy to answer any questions about that. We're going to dive right in right after these committee meetings this morning. And that's my update.
Okay.
Any questions?
Thank you. Any questions by the committee members for Amanda? Mr. Hartford.
Thank you. Thank you, Amanda, for the presentation. So you noted what the opportunities are as it relates to the organization. Are there any recommendations for how do we solve these issues?
I think one thing that I've seen is if you use data, so you have this financial tool and you have really capable folks at the agency who can wield it, use that to make the case.
Okay.
Show them in the data, this is what we have, this is what we're doing the most with what we can. We've righted the ship, which a lot of agencies haven't done at this point, and we're ready for more funding to do what Tampa needs. And so using that data really helps make the case when folks really aren't able to see beyond one budget year. If you can look at what is the incremental impact of X million a year in investment from this partner, well, we could build this, this, and this, and that equates to these bus shelter improvements being built next year and the year after. So that would be my recommendation is use the data you have. You have good data. You have a great staff to do it, and get out there and start making the case.
Okay. Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you, Amanda. That's a very, very, very good point, Mr. King.
Just a quick question. Thank you for your presentation. As I understand it, we are in a strong position fiscally at the moment and poised for growth, provided we do it in a prudent manner.
You have a strong foundation that does not have a fiscal cliff today. If you
Okay.
continue what you're doing, yes.
Okay, all right, very good. Thank you.
Any other questions? I just have a comment. Thank you very much, Amanda. I mean, we've been working on this model, what, 4 years now?
4 years.
4 years. And I, for one, was very in favor of getting this implemented and instituted, but it's just information, okay? And it's got to be dealt with and used properly, and big kudos to the administration, Mr. Drainville, to Ms. Kirk, to Justin, to everybody that's been involved with this. And this is I want to say company-wide because that's my background, but it's agency-wide. Everybody's had a part in this. Everybody's worked hard. Everybody's rowing in the same direction. And it shows that finally this moniker of the cliff is gone. And I want to reiterate that. If we do what we're doing and continue to grow in this direction, the cliff won't come back, okay? But we need to, as you so adeptly stated, use this data to show the world that this is where we know what we're doing it well, we're doing it right, and that the federal opportunities, the state opportunities to invest in HART and invest in our in what we're trying to accomplish, what we're trying to do, it's a good investment. And I think that's the key takeaway from this, that the future, it's not there yet. We have a long way to go, but HART's a good investment for the state and for the feds and the local, the county and so forth. So great presentation. Thank you very much. I look forward to future models coming back. Justin and everybody that's involved with it, thank you for taking on this project, because maintaining a model is very data intensive, and but it is very vital to running an operation such as HART. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time. Thank you. Okay, moving forward, committee action items. Next on the agenda is committee action items for review by the committee for recommendation on approval by the full board. For item 5A is to recommend the HART Board of Directors authorize staff to initiate public involvement activities and conduct a public hearing on proposed fare modifications, as well as authorize the enacting fare suspensions and zero fare services at the discretion of the CEO. In addition to the write-up or proposed resolution, there's a presentation that will be made by Mr. Justin Willits, Director of Planning and Scheduling. Mr. Willits, you are recognized.
Thank you, and good morning again, committee. So, introducing the fare policy changes and equity analysis outreach to move forward, hopefully from the committee to the full board. Title VI Fare Equity Analysis, what is it? It's an assessment conducted by a transit provider to determine whether fare changes, either increases or decreases, will result in a disparate impact on Title VI protected populations. A disparate impact is a procedure or practice that appears to be neutral but has the effect of disproportionately excluding or adversely affecting members of a group identified by race, color, or national origin. That's the fancy version of what I tried to say earlier, just to bring it full circle here. A disproportionate burden is a procedure or practice that appears to be neutral but has the effect of adversely affecting low-income populations greater when compared to other groups. So we are required, HART is required, to comply with all aspects of USDOT's FTA Circular 4702, 1A-B, Title VI requirements and guidelines for FTA recipients. That requirement is that we conduct a fare equity analysis prior to making any change to the fare program. The analysis framework is develop the impact policy and burden policy with public participation, analyze data, assess impacts, modify the proposal if necessary, find a disparate impact if one exists, examine alternatives, and also find disproportionate burdens. And basically come up with strategies to mitigate those burdens that we find as part of the analysis. So our main goals here are we want to look, the main priority is phasing out our paper fares. They are antiquated. We have done the work to bring in Flamingo fares and tap payments. We will still be accepting cash and electronic payment, but the fares are antiquated. They are being phased out, across the industry. PSTA has already phased out their paper fares, so we're trying to just maintain the trajectory of the region as it relates to transit. But since we are opening up this process to do this, we want to look holistically at our whole fare program and see if there's anything else we think we need to tweak. So some of the other goals as part of this process, we want to study the base fare and fare capping. Our last fare change was in 2012. So we want to compare our fares to peer agencies and then establish and update fares with different and new types of services. This is also in relation to the COA work, where we're looking at new on-demand service. We want to establish what those rates will be. So once we determine where the service should go, once we have the technology to do it, the cost of that service is baked into what we will get approved through this process. We want to modernize and simplify fare payment, as I already said. Paper is being phased out across the industry, and we want to stick with cash and tap payments. There's a lot of delays and a lot of burdens created on staff by maintaining those paper fares, so it's part of an operational improvement as well. Improves our service consistency through boarding time and less options for the customers to navigate. And then finally, as part of the goals of the fare policy change, we want to prepare for uncertainty and special events. We are working with the city right now to find the funding to maintain the existing service level and fare-free status of the streetcar. But we want to be in a position where if fares need to be put back later this year or the first of next year, we are in a position to initiate and implement those fares on the streetcar. We are confident the city is going to come up with the funding to maintain the service as it is. But we want to be in a position to where we don't have to go through this process again should something change between now and where we would have to make that decision. So this is the preparing for uncertainty part of this presentation. And then the last bullet here is to allow for special events and promotional services with the CEO approval. One of the things we'd like to contemplate with our potential funding partners is how we can attract their funding. This can happen through a variety of ways. One of the ways is the interim rubber tire streetcar circulator that you've seen many times in front of you at committee and board. That is planned as a fare-free service. So once we get all of the operational funding contributions from the city and probably FDOT, and we have the vehicles to put the service in, we'd like to be able to implement it in maybe a 3-month to 6-month turnaround time without initiating another public hearing and board action. So this is something we're trying to bake into this. Not only that, but more importantly, for special events, whether it's July 4th or maybe Gasparilla, if we can partner with the city to say that the route serving downtown or Bayshore approximately, we'd like to run a fare-free promotion to really attract people. It's probably the best day of the year for people not to bring their vehicles into anywhere close to Bayshore or downtown. So that is something that we'd like to contemplate as part of this fare policy change, to give the CEO the ability to make those calls at a staff level and not have to go through this whole process. So that's how we got here, right? We primarily have focused on the elimination of paper fares, but there are other things we need to be thinking about strategically for the purposes of our partnerships, potential funding, and other implications for the agency. Sorry, that was more long-winded than I planned. Highlighted on the table on your left is the paper fare that we would like to phase out. The other remaining fare structures are planned to stay in place, which is basically just cash and electronic payment, smartphone, debit card, tap to pay, or the Flamingo app, or the Flamingo tappable card. Okay. And just a reminder, I'm not sure all of you know what fare capping is. Basically, we have a system where you can only pay a certain amount and then you will ride for free, whether it be the rest of the day or the rest of the month. Currently, if you get on board the vehicle, you put in $4, you get a one-day fare card. Or if you pay for the electronic version, you tap twice, you hit $4, and you ride the rest of the day as many times as you want. For the monthly fare, you tap until you hit the monthly fare value of $65, and then you ride free for the remaining days of the month. So that's one thing that will remain optional through electronic payment. But we do want to both look at our base fare, which is $2 for a single boarding, but also the capped fare of $4. One of the trade-offs we suspect might come out of this is instead of changing our base fare, maybe we just change the capped fare so that we could increase our revenue, but not disproportionately impact the people who are just taking 1 or 2 rides a day. That would be the same cost. But if they wanted to ride more, maybe we change how we cap the fare, just to kind of set the table for this process as we get into it. So here's our timeline. We'd like to go to the July 15th board to get approval to conduct public hearings and outreach. From August to November, we will do the fare equity analysis, evaluate impacts, develop mitigation strategies, conduct further outreach, come back to the board with a presentation prior to the public hearing. Then in December, we would present a new fare structure, present the findings to the board for approval of the change, continue our outreach to let the public know that this, whatever change is coming, and then implement and complete the transition to Flamingo fares, enact the fare changes, and discontinue paper passes on the 1st of January. So the committee action item is to recommend the HART Board of Directors authorize staff to initiate public involvement activities and conduct a public hearing on proposed fare modifications and authorize enacting fare suspensions and zero fare services at the direction of the Chief Executive Officer. I'll take any questions.
Okay, questions for the board? Mr. King?
Yes, Justin, thank you for your presentation. Just to make sure I understand this correctly, the paper fares you were talking about eliminating are the paper passes?
Yeah, the magnetic stripe paper passes.
Right. Do you have a sense as to how this will impact people in lower income groups?
Yes, I mean, I don't want to speculate before we do the full analysis, but we have a percentage breakdown of how people are paying right now, what percentage cash is, paper fares. So that split will be part of kind of what we can bring back and show you. But we do suspect, there is inevitably going to be an impact. But cash will continue to be available. So we want to know how many people are using, say, a day pass for more than 2 trips, and then kind of figure out how much more this would cost somebody if it was implemented overnight and how we can mitigate that impact. But yes, I mean, given the demographic and core rider that we have, we know that there's going to be some potential impacts.
Well, I hope that we would attempt to minimize any adverse impacts from eliminating paper fares.
That's the plan.
Okay, all right, very good. Thank you.
Any other questions? Ms.
Thank,
Williams?
thank you. My question is centered on what Mr. King asked, and is if you could provide us with some examples of what may take place, please?
Examples of mitigation strategies?
Yes, based on the paper, you're going to take the paper away. So maybe there are some examples of scenarios or that you could provide us that would take place as a result of that.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think one clarification, if I may, Jackie Haldo, Chief Administrative Officer. Currently, the Flamingo Fare technology allows for customers who are paying with $4 a day, if you have the Flamingo card, when you get to $65, I believe it is, which is the monthly fare, pass, I think if you ride in the first 17 days, we'll get you the exact number. It stops charging you for the month. So there is a benefit to those who are paying on a daily basis with the Flamingo card.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? I do have one comment, keeping in mind that this is your dress rehearsal for, presentation to the board for the full board approval. We need to keep in mind, no matter what happens at the end of the study, that we do not impact fair revenues into the overall mix of the project. Amanda's hair will stand on end if we do, but as will all of ours. But we need to be cognizant of that fact that it can't become negative impact to revenues. But any of these changes, but that this is the purpose of the study, is to figure out what we got to do, when we got to do it, and how we're going to do it, correct?
Correct.
Okay, all right. Cool. No other questions, no other comments. I entertain a motion to recommend to the full board.
Motion.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Williams. We have a second.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. King. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Okay, motion passes. Item 5B. In your packets, there's a write-up and a proposed resolution to form a recommendation to the Board of Directors to authorize the CEO to award a contract with a one-year base and 4 one-year option years to Mansfield Oil Company of Gainesville, Palmdale Oil Company, Sunoco LLC, and Petroleum Traders Corporation for the delivery of unleaded and diesel ULSD fuel. Any questions? Anybody, any presentation, anything additional?
I could give a quick overview.
Okay, if you would.
Thank you, Chair. So staff did conduct a cooperative solicitation to award fuel contracts to the named Tampa Bay properties. These contracts are for delivery for diesel and unleaded fuel for HART, the City of St. Petersburg, Lakeland Area Mass Transit, Polk County, PSTA, and Hillsborough County. The contract term will be a one-year base for FY '25. Fuel delivery has 4 one-year options for fuel deliveries in FY '26 through FY '29. The contract is bid on fuel markups covering all costs and fees, profit that are expected to be recovered for each line item. The contracts are awarded on a line item basis. So fuel orders are placed with the suppliers directly by the participating agencies. Deliveries are made directly to the agencies, and invoices are sent and paid by the agencies.
Any minimums? Or are we locked into anything?
I don't believe so.
There's no minimums. We have tank wagon, and then we have the full loads.
Okay,
And the tank wagon minimums, I think, is 500 gallon.
but it's not going to lock us in any pricing?
No,
It'll be
we just
market
order
priced.
as we
Okay.
need it. And we do have the ability to lock on the NYMEX, should we choose to lock futures.
Okay, and these will be individual, every year you'll reapprove it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right. Any other questions? Appearing to be none, is there a motion to move to the full board?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. King, do you have a second? Second by Mr. Knight. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Likewise, no. Motion passes. Thank you very much. Item 5C is to form a recommendation, to recommend to the HART Board of Directors to authorize the purchase of up to 14 Ford F-350 23-foot cutaway-type vans and mobility lifts for Florida Transportation Systems in a not-to-exceed amount of $2,009,042. In addition to the write-up and proposed resolution, there's a presentation for this action item that will be presented by Mr. Nick Goldburn, Director of Fleet Maintenance. Mr. Goldburn, you are recognized, sir. Good morning.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, board members, Mr. Dramble, staff. My name is Nicholas Goldburn. I'm Director of Fleet Maintenance. I will be presenting an overview of our paratransit and flex van fleet and also our replacement plan. The current paratransit and flex fleet have 83 vans assigned. Of the 83, 78 are currently assigned to on-demand for this markup, and 5 are assigned to flex. The state of the fleet is as follows. The average age across the paratransit and flex fleet is 3.89 years. Our vans drive on average 30,000 miles per year, with a statistical mean closer to 40,000 miles per year. To provide context, the average Floridian drives 15,000 miles per year. The average mileage across the entire fleet is 124,000 miles. There are 22 vans that are over 5 years in age and have 173,000 miles on them. There's also, if you go a little deeper into the details, we have 36 vans that are over 4 years and 150,000 miles. The FTA useful life for a paratransit asset, 23-foot, is 5 years, 150,000 miles. So, in thinking about it, almost half of our fleet is at its useful life. The fleet in detail is as follows for our composition. For 2021 model years, we have 11 23-foot Chevy Express with an average of 87,000 miles. For the 2020 model years, we have 8 23-foot Chevy Express Flex, meaning they can be utilized for flex service, with an average of 85,000 miles. We also have, within a 2020 model year fleet, 35 23-foot Chevy Express with an average mileage of 105,000 miles. For the 2019 model year fleet, we have 15 vans with an average of 145,000 miles and 4 that are dedicated for flex service with an average of 152,000 miles. For the 2017 model year fleet, which is our oldest fleet, we have 10 vans assigned to that fleet with an average of 190,000 miles. Fleet composition by age. Our 2017 Chevy Express fleet has 10 vans with an average age of 6.2 years. Our 2019 fleet has 19 vans with an average of 5 years in age. In 2020 and 21, we bought 53 vans in those 2 years, so they're our youngest fleet. There are 43 in the 2020 model year fleet with average 3.2 years, and 11 in 2021 fleet with 2.4 years of age. Utilization. In COVID, we had 85 vans that drove 2.7 million miles for 2019. We moved 196,000 passengers, and the trips for that year were 175,000. And you can see where we went through the COVID period, and now we're rebounding back to current service. FY23, we carried 230,000 passengers. We drove 2.4 million miles. Interesting to note, we provided service in FY23 with 4 less vans than we did during COVID. This increases wear and tear on our assets, and not being able to replace assets adds to our capital needs. There's always a cost. Okay, our fleet replacement plan is as follows. I do want to note that a fleet replacement plan is contingent on funding being available and inflationary constraints. 2025, we're forecasting to replace 19 vans with an average of 175,000 miles on chassis at a cost of $3.3 million. For 2026, we're forecasting 8 additional replacements. They're currently averaging 140,000 miles, and that cost will be $1.4 million. 2027, we're targeting our newest fleet. There are 20, we split the replacement in 2, 20 vans. They're currently averaging 113,000 miles, and we're forecasting the cost to be 2027 at $3.7 million. 2029 and 28 are the following years that we're projecting replacements at 3.9 and 3.2 million. We also have a pending discretionary application with FDOT 5310 application for expansion to the paratransit fleet. This expansion, if approved, would add 6 more vehicles to the fleet at a cost of $1 million. Okay, while we're here today, FY21 5310 grant agreement. On May 30th, Chief Executive Officer signed the Florida Department of Transportation Public Transportation Grant Agreement also called a PTGA. This agreement has a local funding amount of $208,000, a federal pass-through, and a state pass-through. The federal funding amount on the agreement is $1.6 million, and it will authorize $2,088,480 to be available to HART to purchase vehicles through the TRIPS agreement. On May 15th, HART finalized vehicle specifications for 14 Ford Cutaway vans using the FDOT TRIPS contract. Next steps. Next steps, Finance and Audit Committee review and advance to committee action item. Recommend the HART Board of Directors authorize the Chief Executive Officer to purchase up to 14 Ford E350 23-foot cutaway, small cutaway type vans with mobility lifts from Florida Transportation System, Inc. in a not-to-exceed amount of $2,009,042. That concludes my presentations. Do you have any questions?
Anybody have any of the members have, committee members have questions for Mr. Goldberg? I do. Two, number one, what type of delivery schedule are we looking at for these? Potentially?
It varies depending on the OEMs. So the way we purchase orders, we purchase from the OEM order bank. And each year, each OEM opens a certain time period throughout the year where they accept orders from government agencies, and it fluctuates. For this particular order, we're expecting delivery to be Q1 of 2025.
So it'd be next budget year.
Yes.
Okay. And we need 19, we only getting 14?
For this fiscal year.
Okay.
So we are planning to order more vans for next fiscal year.
So will we encumber the monies for these 14 through in October or September 30th?
Yes, I'm going to say yes. It was submitted in our capital plan for FY25.
I guess that's a question for Ms. Kirk or anybody else, but the only other question I have then, this is fully funded at this point?
The capital plan is not fully funded. The purchase for the 14 today is funded.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yes.
Okay, good point of clarification. So these 14 are fully funded, combination of local, state, and federal monies?
Correct.
Correct. And then the last question I have, the inventory for repairs on this, do we have any inventory, since we're shifting from Chevy to Ford, are we going to have any inventory issues with?
No, we should not have any inventory issues. What we're forecasting is a reduce in maintenance costs. New platform we're looking to is actually a smaller platform. It's a unibody, and it also has a smaller engine with more access for technicians to actually work on these assets.
Well, I guess what kind of Chevy inventory do we have on parts and supplies and everything, or is it relatively fluid?
It's relatively fluid.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool. I hate for us to get stuck with a whole bunch of Chevy whatnots and then,
No, we're still going to have our Chevy fleet for the next 3 years at a minimum.
will be a phase out completely.
It'll be a phase out.
Okay, good.
Yep.
All right, cool, thank you. All right, any other questions? Appear to be none. Do we have a motion to move this item to the full board for approval?
So moved.
We have a motion by King, second by Sheffield. Any further question, any further comments? All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you very much. Item 5D. You have a write-up and proposed resolution, your package for resolution, recommendation of the HART Board to authorize the Chief Executive Officer to dispose of 3 40-foot galley low-floor fixed-route buses through donation, competitive sale, public auction, insurance requirements, or disposal in a manner most advantageous to HART. Any comments or any discussion by Mr. Drainville?
I would just say, these 3 buses have exceeded their FTA useful life, 12 years or 500,000 miles.
They all diesel?
Yes.
Okay.
I would add, though, staff is also requesting that one of the buses, vehicle 1005, be donated to Feeding Tampa Bay. And the details about this donation will be on the next action item.
Okay. Any questions for staff?
No questions, Mr. Chair, but I think the idea of donating the van to, or the bus to Feeding Tampa Bay is a great idea.
Okay, so can we have a motion to authorize the disposal?
Motion.
Authorize recommending to the full board for this action.
Gary Hartfield, so moved.
Second.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Like sign, appearing to be none. Motion passes. Action 5E, recommend to the Board of Directors to authorize donation of one transit bus vehicle identification number to the to the Feeding Tampa Bay, and directing the CEO to execute the proper documentation as they pertain to the disposition of the above referenced transit bus. Your comments, Mr. Granville?
Yeah, just a quick overview. So Feeding Tampa Bay did reach out to HART about a few months ago with a request to assist with providing service to their newly rebuilt warehouse on the Causeway Boulevard. So currently, HART does not have no service to that corridor, including paratransit service, with no funds to support any service in that location. So Feeding Tampa Bay, Commissioner Myers, and the HART staff explored many options. And Feeding Tampa Bay will continue to look for funding to help us support service to their facility. As a short-term intermediate solution, they also expressed an interest in the surplus transit bus to establish the transit route, allowing access to their transportation needs. So this vehicle, again, has exceeded its useful life, and this is the solution we came up with for the short term. But this puts in a great example of Ms. Vandergrift's statement on status quo. This is the request that hard for HART to add any more service because we don't have the funding to do so. To stay off that fiscal cliff, we have to remain status quo and just do the best we can with what we have. So I just wanted to add that in there as an example to how we get many requests, and we would love to accommodate them all, but we just don't have the funding to do so.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Any questions, Mr. Drainville? Okay. Entertain a motion to recommend to the HART Board of Directors to approve item 5E and advance it to the full board of the July 15th meeting.
Gary Hartfield, so moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion, a second. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Appearing to be none, motion passes. Final action item is a write-up and has a write-up and a proposed resolution in your packet to recommend to the Board of Directors to authorize the CEO to exercise option years 1 of the existing contract with Design Lab, Inc. Anybody got anything to offer? Any questions or comments on this? What's this all about, Mr. Granville?
This is just back in August 4th, 2021, HART did execute a contract with Design Labs for the purchase of the uniforms for the drivers and the not-to-exceed amount of just under $1.2 million. So this is just exercising an option here from that contract for the uniforms for the operators.
Would we not have approved that in the original contract?
So, and that's something staff's looking into because, to save time, we would like to go back to the board just to give the CEO, myself, the approval to exercise the actual, one of the action years for the contracts. And it makes a lot, much more efficient, and staff too, to push this along. So we're gonna be asking for, when we come back to the board, or the committees, to ask that I have the authority to exercise the full contract and not come back for every option year that we wanna.
So this is just one of the existing contracts that still had the
Yes.
requirement to go back to
Yes,
exercise the options.
correct.
How many more are there? Any idea?
I'm not sure, but we come across them from time to time where we didn't write the resolution to allow the
It's
CEO
like
to
playing
exercise
whack-a-mole. One
options.
comes up every
I
time.
know,
Okay, all right.
yeah.
All right, just curious, make sure that we're, because we just did one to give you the authorization for the next 4 years, and make sure we don't have to come back for that. Okay, any other questions, Mr. Drainville? Appearing to be none. Do we have a motion to recommend to the HART Board of Directors to
Motion
approve
approved.
5E? Okay, we have a
Motion.
motion, we have seconds?
Second, Gary
Motion-
Hartfield.
Motion is second. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Appearing to be none. Motion passes. Procurement monitoring, Mr. Drainville, you're recognized to share updates for sole source awards, task ordering, contract monitoring, and notice of solicitation.
Thank you, Chair. So since the last committee, there has been one sole source added to the report to Trapeze Software Group Incorporated in the amount of $80,461. And this is for on-site training, trapeze training for planning, customer service, and operations. The Trapeze Software Group is the sole provider of the trapeze products, training, and the product maintenance. So strictly, that's the only sole source for this since that. Going on to task orders, there has been no new task orders since the last committee. In regards to notice of solicitations, there were 3. The first was a solicitation for general services consultants to augment staff capabilities in the general areas of planning, service development, environmental clearance, architecture and engineering, and construction management assistance. Multiple awards may be made. The term of the contract is a 3-year base with 2 one-year options. The collective not-to-exceed contract value is $5 million in the 5-year term. Funding will be identified prior to task orders being issued on these contracts. The second is a solicitation for bus midlife overhauls for a contract to perform midlife overhauls on up to 40 Gillig low-floor 40-foot compressed natural transit buses. They have accumulated over 200,000 miles. The objective is to ensure the buses meet or exceed their expected service life with enhanced reliability, safety, and performance. The term of the contract is a 3-year base with 2 one-year options. The estimated contract value is $4.3 million, funded by the Urbanized Area Formula Grant 5307P 2022. And when you talk about bus overhauls, it's just, we go through it, we change the engine, the transmission, other major components to make sure that it meets and exceeds that useful life. And the third is a solicitation for emerging technology and amenities for a contract to engineer, build, and install battery or solar digital real-time displays, providing passenger information, date and time, route information, and real-time arrival data. Additionally, the displays will allow for alerts and emergency notifications, visual maps of route detours, shop relocations. The installation application is shelter, wall, totem, kiosk, pole, and custom build. And the term of the contract is a 2-year base with 3 one-year options. The estimated not-to-exceed contract value is $3,713,059, funded by FTOP CAP funding for the BTI bus stop improvements with a 50-50 split grant. And that concludes the procurement.
Very good. Any questions or comments by the board to Mr. Drainville? Appearing to be none. Okay, moving forward. Is there any old business? Any new business? We stand adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.